What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Fantasy Football 201. In today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to look at 3 different mock drafts. I'm going to draft in an 8-team league, a 12-team league, and a 16-team league to show you the different strategies of what you can do depending on the size of your league. If you may have noticed in a previous video, I did a mock draft where I also did 3 different mock drafts. That was more so looking at the different players that you can take from different positions in the draft, whether you're drafting at the 1-2 turn or with the 101 pick. This video is more going to be focusing on how your strategy changes depending on the different sizes of your league. If you're interested in more content like this, please check out my channel. I have a wide variety of content that you can check out in the description below. Most recently, I had a running back strategy video. I also have strategies on all the other positions except wide receivers, which will be coming out over the next few days. I also have divisional previews and other content you can check out from years past as well. So please take a look at that and drop a comment because I reply to all my commenters on this channel, so please take advantage of that. All right, so in this draft, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the 8-team league, and I'm going to show you how some strategies change with the 8-team league versus a 12-team and a 16-team league. So the overall point of what I'm going to try to explain to you is that in an 8-team league, the biggest thing that you want to look for is stacking your upside, because a lot of these teams will be very talented in the small leagues. There's a lot of them are going to have great players, but you want to try to find the ways to maximize your best players. So a good way to do this is through stacks. A good way to do this is through trying to reach at the elite positions where they're scarce at certain positions to try to grab your best players. Whereas in the deeper leagues where you're going to have 14, 16, some leagues even go as big as 20-team leagues, your strategy changes a little bit, and I'm going to show you that there's some positions that I may be more willing to bypass on in order to stack my depth in a league where there's going to be a shortage of certain players that could really help your fantasy roster. You want to try to move some of the positions that you would otherwise reach for in the smaller leagues, push them off to the end. So I will start by going through the 8-team league, and I'm going to have the 102 position. I had the 101 earlier in a mock draft video that I did last week. I'm going to do the 102 to show you how things change just a little bit. And just for a heads up in this video, all of these are 2 flex single quarterback leagues in a full PPR format using Sleeper as the mock draft platform. So as you can see here, this is my mock draft that I have. I have the 102 position. And not surprisingly, Jamar Chase went number 1 overall. He's pretty much the consensus 101 across multiple different platforms. So as a result, as I mentioned in my running back video, which you can check out from a couple days ago, I'm taking Saquon Barkley with the 101. And Saquon, to me, as I've already talked about in that video, you can check it out there, he's the best running back on one of the best offenses in the league, and I believe that he's just too dominant. Despite what the concerns about his age and whatnot, he's too dominant of a player for me on too great of a team to pass up if you have the option to take him as the number 1 running back. So I let the draft board move around. You have the other heavy hitter names like Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Justin Jefferson, a lot of the wide receiver ones that are getting consideration there. And the key thing with this is that you're going to get some players that, you know, in the more like moderate size leagues, like 10 to 12 league, a little more standard league sizes that you'll see. In the 8-team league, you'll be surprised. You'll get some very good names that may slip a little bit. And in this one, the one that fell to me was Ashton Genty. So when Ashton Genty came around to me there, I was a little surprised. Kind of expecting to maybe go with the Drake London option, but when Genty came around, that was too great of a running back talent for me to pass on as well. Devon Achane, it was an interesting consideration to me, as well as A.J. Brown and Brian Thomas for that 207 spot, but I decided to go with Genty because ultimately having Saquon as my RB1 and then having Genty as an RB2, I would love that in any type of format involving running backs, which are generally hard to get at a premium. They are excellent. The elite talent at running back really gives you an edge in fantasy. And if I could have Genty as an RB2, along with Saquon, who I already know is going to give me points, that really gives me quite an edge. So as you know, in the more deeper leagues, you may want to go wide receiver here, but here I'm trying to go running back heavy early on to try to basically see if I can get the best of the best at one of the positions that is pretty hard to nail correctly in fantasy football. So Genty went to me at 207, so now I got Genty as my RB2. Then Achane and Brian Thomas went off the board. And, you know, this is a player that fell to me around 302 that, you know, I was looking at A.J. Brown, but some of the other names I was considering as possibilities as well, just because, as I mentioned, you want to try to get some of the elite if you can to really stand out from other very good teams that you'll have in a small league, is to maybe look at Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson here. But ultimately what I decided to do is that at this point of the draft, you're not going to get much better wide receiver ones than A.J. Brown. I know he's dealing with the hamstring injury right now, but I feel confident that he is going to be all right for week 1. And the Eagles are playing this conservatively. But A.J. Brown, when he is healthy, is clearly locked and loaded as the number 1 target for the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't love the fact that I already have Saquon on this team going with that, but at the same time, that could be a magnifier as well to just lean into the Eagles' offense here. And I think A.J. Brown is just too good of a talent for me to pass on. So originally my plan was to go Josh Allen, try to see if I could get, in my opinion, the best overall quarterback to pair with my excellent running back core. But because A.J. Brown stayed on the board, that ultimately made me decide to go with A.J. Brown. And again, this is kind of one of the things that you'll have to do on draft day, is that you may have a plan that goes according to, you know, this guy is going to fall to me here, but you have to be able to pivot when some of your league mates don't value certain players the same way as you may expect. Somebody may fall, and if you have them higher on your board, then you have to go with them. I know you may have had a plan going into it, and although you really don't want to deviate from your plan too much, I think if you do have great talent fall to you, you want to take that. So A.J. Brown available to me at 307. Happy to have him as my wide receiver 1. And then as mentioned, you know, the 2 great quarterback talents, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, going in the 3rd round. Not surprising to me. You get some other good running backs off the board, and as well as some of the receivers as well that are going up at the top, like Ladd McConkey, Tyreek Hill, JSN, etc. So coming around to me in the 4th round, and I've talked about this guy again in my running back video you can check out. Really like him, Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals. Top 10 running back to close the season last year once Zach Moss was injured. Chase Brown is a guy that, especially at PPR, is going to be excellent value. And considering that I have 2 flexes, it really doesn't hurt me to just lean even heavier into a great running back core that could really help me stand out from the other players in this league. So what I decided to do was to take Chase Brown here, get him as my 3rd running back that I could put in the flex. And, you know, if I do have some receivers that can break out, maybe Chase Brown could be used in certain matchups as my RB2, move Saquon or Genty to the bench if they're on a bye. Saquon is never going to go to the bench. I shouldn't ever imply that. But I'm just saying that, you know, if something should happen to Genty or Saquon, or they get injured, they have a bye week, I have a great 3rd option at running back in Chase Brown. George Kittle was also in consideration, as well as James Cook. But ultimately, what I decided to do is to go quarterback a little bit earlier don't want to go both quarterback and tight end, because that does sacrifice a lot of depth at running back and wide receiver that I want to get early on. So I decided to pass on Kittle and see what happens at quarterback. And what I had hoped for happened in the 5th round. Jalen Hurts was available. And, you know, this is a tough conversation of, you know, I already have 2 Eagles. Do I want to go Jalen Hurts? I also have other guys that I like up there, like Marvin Harrison could be my wide receiver 2. Jaden Daniels is there. Hampton is there, Kamara is there, other guys that I like. But for me, what I felt that this team needed was to get an elite quarterback. And Eagles are already a great offense. I'm going to be in a shallow league. I'm going to be leaning on this Eagles team to really set the difference for me between these other league mates. I would not be doing this in the deep leagues because then you really increase your risk of things falling apart for you by going all Eagles here. But the Eagles are one of the best offenses in the league. And in this particular case here in a shallow league, you want to lean into that. And if the Eagles' offense is as good as they should be, which I don't see any indications why they should not be a great offense, then pretty much any time they go off, I'm going to be at a great advantage to potentially win that week with the three best players offensively on this team. So Jalen Hurts, I'm taking him. I'm taking Saquon Barkley and A.J. Brown, so I could basically lock up this Eagles offense, and the majority of their touchdowns, majority of their yardage, etc. should give me a nice edge over my opponents. And I'm going to trust that I can get some good receivers later on that could help fill the void volume-wise, because there's a lot of receivers that I like 5th to 8th round, as you'll see in the video coming out soon. The picks come around. I lose out on Jaden Daniels and Joe Burrow. Those quarterbacks are gone. Figured 5th round was probably the window to try to take advantage of that, especially since I was going late in the 6th round to get one of the quarterbacks that I really like. A lot of running backs went off the board, which was good for me because the guy that I wanted to try to get here, and you could argue that maybe it would be better to have Jaden Daniels if I had known this guy was coming around. Wasn't too sure about that though. Terry McLaurin. I do feel confident that this deal is going to get done at this point. The Commanders' offense knows that they need him. Terry McLaurin, to me, is the guy that is one of the better wide receivers that you can get in this range, especially to get him in the 6th round in an 8-team league is incredible value. This is a guy that has top 10 wide receiver talent. Really, the only reason that he's fallen in draft boards is because of the contract situation. But I do feel that this is excellent, and if I can get him as my wide receiver 2 in a league like this where I already have 3 great running backs, good quarterback, very happy about this outcome. And there are some other wide receivers I like coming around the board for me as well. I wanted to go next either one of Zay Flowers or Cortland Sutton, and the reason I like them is that much like McLaurin in a way, but even more so, those guys are going early to mid-round range, like 5th to 8th round, even in the deeper leagues as well. Deeper is in like 12-team. And they are a great value that you can grab that should be number 1 options on their team with pretty good offenses too, and be very underrated value that you can get. So Zay Flowers went off the board. That allowed me to get Cortland Sutton as my wide receiver 3. And now I have all my flex spots pretty much set. I have Chase Brown and Cortland Sutton. I have 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs. Got Jalen Hurts. Need to get a tight end down the road as well, but there are some good options I could pursue there. So because of that, I'm feeling pretty good about my situation with this team. Now it comes back around again, and a lot of those tight ends that I mentioned went off the board. I'm not super high on any of the 3 that I missed out on, though. Laporta, Hawkinson, or Kelsey. I kind of that group, honestly, prefer Kelsey to his ADP. But then we got some wide receivers go off the board that I like. I would have considered McMillan had he had fallen to me, as well as David Montgomery. But in this position, what I decided to do, I feel confident because I look at my opponent here, and I could take Mark Andrews here because I need a tight end, but I only have one guy on the other end who's going to be drafting, and he already took George Kittle. So chances are he's not going to take Andrews. So what I decided to do was to increase my running back depth, take a guy that I really like, Travion Henderson, just give my running back core even more juice that it already has with Saquon, Gentry, and Chase Brown. Get Travion Henderson in there too. I don't need to rush him right away while he sifts through the timeshare that he'll probably start out with Ramondre Stevenson. And I know that my opponent's not going to take a tight end because they already took George Kittle. And conveniently enough, that allowed Mark Andrews to fall to me at the 902, which, Mark Andrews' 9th round is great, but probably only going to see that in 8-team leagues like you're seeing here. So I've got my starting core rounded out. Mark Andrews, I would have considered dropping a little bit to try to get Tyler Warren, but I think in this particular situation, especially since I don't have any other Ravens, I'm going to be, and I already got some really heavy hitters anyway in my lineup with the running back core, Jalen Hurts, some solid receivers I grabbed later on. I'm going to bet on Mark Andrews being the difference maker in terms of the touchdowns that he can provide at the goal line to try to help me there. Things come around to me again, and in the 10th round, the running backs, there's a lot of running backs went off the board, like Judkins, Jones. Judkins would have really been interesting had he fallen to me, because this is a great opportunity to stash him and see what happens there. A couple wide receivers went off the board. The ones that were really in consideration for me here were Pollard and Caleb Johnson. I decided to go Pollard because I know with the Spears injury, I believe Pollard will be very good. If I'd taken Ridley, I probably would have gone Caleb Johnson to just diversify things a little bit between offenses. But since I did not get Ridley in this draft, I decided to go Tony Pollard here. Odunze and Myers went off the board next, and then to take as my fourth wide receiver, I decided to go with the guy that, he can sit on my bench for now, give him some time to recover from his ACL injury. Stephon Diggs, to me, is another good receiver that you can get, who should be the number one option on New England. They don't really have a lot of experienced receiving options aside from Diggs on this team, and I think once he's on the field and healthy, regardless of if he looks like prime Stephon Diggs, he's still going to be heavily involved, and in a full PPR league, he will be very valuable as a guy that you can grab in the middle rounds as well. Really like him as a good underrated wide receiver option that you can take too. Couple more receivers go off the boards. Guys I'm not super high on, like Deebo Samuel, Cooper Kupp, etc. Travis Etienne is an interesting wild card candidate. I'll talk about him in a little bit. I've mentioned him as well in my mock video. One of the few running backs that you can kind of get in that range who could really give you that elite upside potential that you can grab in the middle to late rounds here. I really wanted to try to see if I can get one of the defenses at this turn, because I know that coming out of this 13th round turn where I am, there's going to be a lot of defenses going. The Philadelphia Eagles went first on the board. Should be a solid defense, not my favorite. You can check out my defense video to see why. So I decided to go with some more wide receiver upside, because I would ideally like to get 5 wide receivers that I can know are going to be interesting target volumes that should get a lot of volume on their team. And I don't need to start Ricky Pearsall right away. I could see how this situation develops in San Francisco. I'm going to take Ricky Pearsall here to give me a solid 5th wide receiver that I could put on the bench, see what happens there. Could very well start certain weeks. I think he's an underrated upside that you can grab in the middle to late rounds in fantasy drafts. Jordan Mason and Cam Skattebo went off the board next. I did put some consideration into both of those guys, but I do feel that Pearsall is one of the last receivers that you can kind of get in this range that gives you that high upside value. And I decided to go receiver here. But what I decided to do in this next round was to take the Denver Broncos defense, lock them up, and make sure that I have my defense that is my number one defense on the season here in the 13th round. So in the last 2 rounds of the draft, what I decided to do is round out my running back depth. I wanted to go with 2 guys that I feel one could start and one give me insurance. The guy that I decided to go with as my starter, I decided to go J.K. Dobbins, because I do feel that this is, again, another running back that you can get very late who should give you quite a bit of volume in Denver. I talked about this in my running back video, but Dobbins should get a large majority of first-team reps. I do think this situation is going to be a little bit more of a timeshare than we'd all like, so it kind of hurts R.J. Harvey's value to me. But I think Dobbins, for somebody you can grab late, is a good flyer to take advantage of. I decided to not go kicker here because if Brandon Aubrey had fallen to me, I probably would have gone that. But I did put some thought into Boswell and Dicker. But ultimately what I would like to do, just in case anything happens to my number one player, Saquon Barkley, I'm going to grab Will Shipley, hold him until week 1 just in case of any freak accidents. So then if anything does happen to him, I have his handcuff. and I could wait this out until, Thursday night and see what happens to it. If Saquon's good to go, I'll probably drop Will Shipley, or if Stephon Diggs ends up going on the IR for the first few games of the season, I could put him on my IR spot and then take the kicker later. But I want to get Will Shipley. Just make sure you have insurance on your best player in fantasy. I would still do that even in these shallow leagues with 8 teams. Make sure that you have your top running back handcuffed. Next, we will go to the 12-team league. So now we're getting a little bit deeper, and I'm going to start here with the 106. I've not drafted from the 106 position yet, so I'm going to show you some strategies there. You'll see some players pop up, again, that I like. And I'm going to tell you, since in the last video I went JSN 3 different times because I really like JSN as a wide receiver you can get in the 3rd round. I told myself in this video I'm not going to include JSN, so just for your awareness, I'm going to look at other options, just show you that there are some other options as well. But I do like JSN, not going to be drafted today. So in this mock here, as you can see, I decided to go CD Lamb 1. Once you get past that top 5 that I've mentioned, the 3 running backs, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, there's a lot of debate at what you do at 106. I like Lamb the most personally because I feel that ultimately this offense is very good. I don't really see George Pickens hurting CD Lamb as much as just helping him get open. That was the big problem with Dallas last year, is that they didn't have any other options and the defense focused on CD. But now that they do have a credible wide receiver too, Dak should be a little more healthy this year, hopefully. Now I believe that he is the best option because of the upside that he presents at these wide receivers. Then it would be Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then the rest of it you can check out in my video coming out in a couple days. So we go around to the 2nd round here. The other wide receivers that are generally have 1st round grades going off the board. Running backs going off the board as well. And I'm going to highlight this guy as well in my video coming up because Drake London, to me, is one of the best value wide receivers that you can take in the 2nd round. He was a top 5 receiver last year, and that was despite the swoon that Kirk Cousins had in the middle of the season last year. Drake London, to me, is going to have excellent target volume. There's not a lot of other options behind him that are reliable, especially with Mooney's injury and just Kyle Pitts being the way that he is. So I think that Drake London is an excellent pick that you can take in the 2nd round. I talked about this a couple videos ago as well. I did put some thought into Trey McBride just to get a good tight end, maybe wait a little bit. You can possibly do a Kyler Murray, Trey McBride stack, but I decided to not do that here. Garrett Wilson was in consideration for me as well. So coming back around, I decided to go Chase Brown again. Just love him as a very underrated running back that you can grab in 3rd round range. He's one of the best options to me that you could take in the 3rd round. Comes back around to me again, and another running back that I really like was available, Omari and Hampton. I honestly don't feel that he's even going to be here by the time we get to Labor Day weekend when most drafts are. I think Omari and Hampton is going to continue to rise in the draft board, as it appears that Najee Harris is not going to be ready to go for week 1 based on what we've been seeing. This is I think one of the best outcomes that I could have asked for, honestly, in a 12-team league like this, drafting in the middle, is get 2 good wide receivers that should get a lot of volume, and then get 2 running backs that are young, explosive, and should be on good offenses to be heavily involved themselves. So the top 4 I'm very happy about at this point. I missed out on all the quarterbacks, though, by choosing to go this route, and I think ultimately my overall point with this is that once you start getting into deeper leagues, it becomes more important to make sure that you're getting your running backs and your wide receivers early rather than the quarterbacks, the tight ends, and then especially the defense and the kicker, because you want to make sure that you're trying to get the best value as late as you can. So as you may see here, I'm not going with the guys like the Jalen Hurts, the Jaden Daniels, the guys like that. I'm going to try to see if I can get my running back and wide receiver depth shored up, especially with wide receivers that are going to get a lot of volume in full PPR formats. So I'm going to put off those positions as much as I can until where I see there is a delineation of a value drop off where you can get some of the best value for somebody as high as you can get, or at some of the best value at a round that is reasonable for me, in which it doesn't drop off significantly after that. So as a result, Patrick Mahomes goes in the 5th round. Sam Laporta, I don't really like either of those two because I don't think that they're giving you anything special for the range that they're going relative to guys that you can get later on. Couple wide receivers went off the board that I like Terry McLaurin. Cortland Sutton was looking at them as my 3rd. I decided to go with the next guy on my board that I like as a good wide receiver option, Zay Flowers. I don't love Zay Flowers as much as some of the guys like Sutton from the perspective that I feel Zay Flowers is an argument that he is not the wide receiver one. Maybe it'll be Mark Andrews some weeks. They've got Derrick Henry, obviously. I think that of the wide receivers, though, this guy should be the top option for Lamar, and he's going pretty late considering the potential that he has on a great offense like that. I personally feel that Zay Flowers is going at a great ADP to take a flyer on him. You'd like to see the consistency improve, but this offense is so good that I would be willing to draft him, especially as a 3rd wide receiver that'll be flex for me on this particular team. The draft board moves around a little bit more, and you have some other guys going that I like Tedro McMillan. You have some of the running backs that I really like David Montgomery going off the board. Some interesting names as well, like Travis Hunter, Jameson Williams, etc. But the guy that I probably honestly like more than all of those guys, except maybe Montgomery and Tedro McMillan, is Calvin Ridley of the Tennessee Titans. I've talked about him in my last video that I did mock drafts on. This, to me, is a Terry McLaurin potential sleeper from what we saw Terry McLaurin do in 2024. This guy is going very late in drafts, already has shown a lot of rapport with Cam Ward. Cam Ward, I believe, should elevate this offense tremendously from what we saw with Will Levis, and Calvin Ridley is the best option that they have in the passing game there by quite a lot. I think this could be a great season for Calvin Ridley, and I'm taking him in a lot of places, as you've seen if you've been watching my channel, around this 5th to 7th round range. So at this point now, I've got 4 good receivers. I've got all my flex positions filled up, and this is ideally what I want to do in a full PPR league, is try to get those possession wide, or not necessarily possession wide receivers, but high volume wide receivers that are going to get a lot of points in PPR. Get 2 good running backs. Now I'm going to start focusing in on those secondary positions that I need to fill with what I think should be good value for me later on. There's a couple good tight ends that I like. Mark Andrews, despite having Flowers, I wouldn't be opposed to that. David Njoku, especially now that Joe Flacco is the starter, Njoku's value definitely went up there. You still got some other running back names. You got Bo Nix. Probably would have been more appealing should Sutton had fallen to me. So it comes around to me, and Mark Andrews goes off the board. Bo Nix goes off the board. A couple running backs that I like are going off the board too. So the move here for me is to take a tight end. And I could decide to go Tyler Warren or David Njoku. And for me right now, I'm going to go Njoku just to mix things up. I did a little bit of Tyler Warren already. I like both those guys a lot. And I think both those guys, in a way, benefited from the quarterback changes that we saw this week, getting Daniel Jones and the Colts, and then Joe Flacco for the Browns. But I'm going to go Njoku here. I think he should be a good centerpiece of that offense, and is a great tight end that you can get later on that I think gives you pretty equivalent value of all the names going ahead of him. Except for maybe Mark Andrews. I still probably prefer Mark Andrews, but David Njoku, I'm pretty happy to get him there. Tony Pollard, honorable mention pick there, as well as not Brian Robinson. I'd say maybe Judkins is an interesting name. The guy I put the most thought into for this pick was Tony Pollard, but decided to make sure I get the tight end that I wanted, because I need to get a quarterback here in this next pick too. And that's how things worked out. the guy I was targeting here was Kyler Murray. I think there's a pretty clear drop-off to me after Murray in terms of the upside. Because one of the rushing, and two, you hope that this offense can kind of figure things out. Murray has the upside of all the quarterbacks that you're drafting 8th round or later to potentially be a high-level pick. We don't have a ton of rookies that expect to be huge fantasy players this year. Murray is, to me, one of the better values that you can get later on in the draft process. So I decided to get Kyler Murray here, get that quarterback. Now my focus is going to be on trying to get a good defense and then trying to build depth at the other positions. Because now we have increased league size, I may be looking at a second quarterback too, where I would not be doing that in a smaller league. Things come back around to me. I go J.K. Dobbins again. I already talked about him. Don't need to go too much more into that. Comes back around to me in the next round, and at this point, I do want to say with Dobbins, I would have considered Denver if they had come to me there, but Denver was not available. So what I'm going to try to do now that I lost Denver, I'm going to try to make sure that I probably go a little bit later on defense, try to get some more depth at the running back and wide receiver. You get a defense that I like a little bit later on. I tried to play the game that maybe Pittsburgh would fall, and I went Dobbins there, but it didn't happen. And at that point, I decided to wait another round on my defense. Took Keon Coleman, who, to me, Coleman, I'll be talking about him in the video for wide receivers, but he's one of the better options that you could take. Again, that is going pretty late in draft process, who could very well be the wide receiver 1 for Buffalo. Second-year player with a ton of upside, should be a good possession target for Josh Allen. A lot of upside here for somebody that is getting drafted as a bench wide receiver. Of the running backs left, Charbonnet is somebody that I was interested in, but he went off the board. Didn't really love anybody in the range. Ramondre Stevenson to me is a no. Even if I have Travion Henderson, I'm not very interested in Ramondre Stevenson at all. So this is the point where I decided to take my defense, and I decided to go Houston here. Baltimore and Buffalo, you could make an argument that they are better defenses, but they're playing each other week 1, and I don't think that's going to be a great fantasy defense performance there. So I decided to go with, Houston is playing Los Angeles, who is Matt Stafford going to be the quarterback, or is it going to be Jimmy Garoppolo? Because if it's Garoppolo, that could be a very good week 1 for me, help me win that week. After that, we had more defenses go off the boards. Then the kickers start going off the boards. We had 5 of them go already. That was, to me, I think that's, when I see people taking kickers in these rounds, it's just like, okay, this gives me more options to get some depth that I need, because I'm going to need it for these leagues that are deep. And that's how it worked out for me to get Jadon Blue. Talked about him in my video. I don't love him among the rookie options, but he is intriguing because Dallas does not really have a bona fide starter. They've got Miles Sanders and they've got Javonte Williams, who have both been inconsistent throughout their career. I think it's an intriguing option to look at. My 4th running back doesn't really cost me too much. Argument that I could have taken Austin Eckler there. I will talk about that though when I get to a pick later on. The Commanders running back situation, which is a development since my running back video, is very interesting. So at this point, Murray to me is, as good as he is, he comes with a lot of inconsistency. And I want to take another high upside quarterback here that I think I can get late that could give me some good value for fantasy. And I decided to go Justin Fields here. I'm going to bet on Justin Fields. He's got Tyrod Taylor behind him. I don't think there's any real threat to him losing his starting job, for one. And then 2, he's a great runner. So because of that, he's going to give you a very consistent floor week to week. I think he's one of the better quarterback values that you can get late. Next week I'll do a super flex mock, and he's going to be one of the guys that I'm targeting as my second quarterback for sure. Going very late in sleeper for what his potential upside could be. Coming back around again, some running backs went off the board, but not the one that I really like, and that is Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. So I personally, I was wrong. I felt that Brian Robinson was pretty safe in Washington, but apparently not. Since I made that running back video, they've been shopping him according to reports. They also sat him in that game, which was not because they were trying to preserve him for week 1, but because of a mutual decision to explore the market. And I think this is more of a sign to me that McLaurin is going to get signed, because what they're trying to do to me is shop Brian Robinson and go with maybe Austin Eckler. I think that's a good pick now in the 12th, 13th round that you can get on Sleeper. But then also Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who is going to be shooting up draft boards over the next couple weeks, because this guy, to me, if you're going with somebody with upside who could take this backfield, a guy who's been in college a while, has experience, he's the one that could do that. And I wish, looking back on that running back video, that I rated him a little higher than I did, and I was a little more bullish on him. But I think this really becomes an incredibly intriguing option. This will not be the last mock that I am taking him. And in fact, you may see this Washington running back core is one of the best that you could target late for a great team, because we don't really have any idea who the starter is going to be right now. But I would be taking a flyer on Austin Eckler and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, because I do think that both those guys you can get late as bench running backs, but there's an argument that both of them could be the starter for an excellent offense led by Jaden Daniels. And then for this last pick, much like I talked about earlier in my last video, I'm going to be not drafting a kicker here. I'm going to try to get some running back depth, see what happens. And my handcuff here that I'm going to mention is Jerome Ford. If Judkins is suspended and not playing the first few weeks, Jerome Ford should be very good for fantasy. Don't love him as a player, but the situation lends itself to him being a clear path as a starter to begin week 1. And they get the Cincinnati Bengals, which is a terrible run defense. Great pick to take at the end and just kind of monitor this Judkins situation and see what happens. All right, so this is the big draft. This is the one where, I really hope these names you can read on the screen, because it takes a lot to try to fit all the names on into a 16-team league here. I'm going to be drafting right in the middle around the 108 position. And the biggest strategy change here, very similar to what I said with the 12-team league. You're going to be trying to get running backs and wide receivers, but you're going to be trying to shoot for the upside here of what you can get with them. I'm going to be trying to get possession wide receivers that are going to get a lot of volume personally. I'm going to be trying to get some good running backs, and then I'm going to try to delay all the other positions to get the best value that I can as late as I can go. So what I decided to do here at the 108, the names went off that you would suspect go in the top 5. I already mentioned them. You also lost CD and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So what do I do next? There's a little bit of a drop-off to me there. Puka is, if Matt Stafford was healthy, I would probably go him, but we don't know what that situation looks like. Malik Neighbors, the Giants situation is kind of a mess. Nico Collins I like, but I don't know if I like him as much as this player. I'm going with the highest upside here that I could take at a position that is, 1, scarce, and 2, if all health goes his way, team has a lot of injuries. Christian McCaffrey, to me, is my pick. I talked about why I like Christian McCaffrey in my running back video. You can check that out. I'm going him here in my first overall pick. There's some risk in that, but I do have an insurance plan that I will talk later on for him. Chase Brown went next. I've taken him in all 3 drafts. You don't have to really see why. I did put some thought into some of the other guys, but I told you I was not going to take JSN. I'm going to probably do the same thing in this next mock video I make, is not take Chase Brown, because I've done that multiple times. Don't love these other wide receivers, though. Garrett Wilson of consideration, but I decided to, get my second running back that I really like and try to get some good wide receivers later, because like I've said, there are good wide receivers you can get that should get a lot of volume in the early to mid rounds. Next, you had the quarterbacks go off the board. We already had Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson go second round, but now all the other ones go in the third round. So you really have to adjust your frame of reference of where these guys are going and not really think so much the round, but just what is out there. So you may think like Joe Burrow, third round pick, that's crazy. Well, you have to, it's just a bigger league. I know that it kind of sounds stupid to just think of it like that way, but like don't like marry yourself to the round that they're being taken. You have to adjust based on what is available to you. Put some thought into the construct of your team because you're dealing with the bigger league and you've got certain needs that you have to fill. Terry McLaurin coming to me here, was very happy about that. Took him in my first mock in this video. One of the better picks that you can get at this range. You start to lose out on the other running backs that I like. I thought about Hampton and Kamara here, but I want to make sure I get a good receiver because the talent really drops off there if you don't start taking advantage of that now. So I wanted to get receiver here, and we'll probably go receivers the next few picks, as you can tell if you're watching this on YouTube. Then I decided to go Tedero McMillan. Really like him. This Carolina, based out of Charlotte. It gets confusing when it's like Charlotte Hornets and then you got the Carolina Panthers, same city, different name. But I like Tedero McMillan a lot. I think he's also very underrated, and he should be a heavy targeted rookie wide receiver on a team that has an improving offense, I should say. Not great yet, but I think this is a great pick that I could take as my second wide receiver and pair him with two good running backs. So in a 16-team league, to have McCaffrey, Chase Brown, Terry McLaurin, and T-Mac, I'm pretty happy about that, to be honest. Comes back around again, and Baker goes off the board, so we now have 7 quarterbacks off the board. So I need to start focusing a little bit more on my quarterback options now that Baker is gone, because that range of the next guys, Bo Nix and Kyler Murray, are the ones that I'm targeting. But I decided to go Calvin Ridley here, get another good wide receiver, fill up that second flex with another guy that should be heavily targeted. But I'm going to probably need a fourth to feel comfortable before I start reaching for the other positions. And, you see these names like Addison, Adunze, Olave, Jacoby Myers, 5th-round picks, so we're running out of options pretty quick. We also lost Tyler Warren early, who was one of the guys I was targeting late. So at this point, I was expecting that, I could get Warren or Njoku maybe around later, but it's not looking that way right now. So I have to make a tough decision here of if I'm going to go Njoku or if I'm just going to punt that position to the end to another guy that I really like, or fill that spot with the wide receiver. So you have to be a lot more tactful in these deep leagues about what you're going to do. And you have to have a backup plan, because if your guy goes, you don't want to reach for somebody that you feel like iffy about. You want to punt that off, get some other good value. And that's what I decided to do by going Diggs, because I do feel when Diggs is healthy, he's going to be heavily involved and pretty good for fantasy too. ETN was somebody I did put some thought into, but ultimately, as much as upside as Travis Etienne has, he still has 3 other running backs there that are a little concerning to me in terms of what is that backfield going to look like. Could we see Travis Etienne go the Bucky Irving route, or could he go the Rachaad White route where he gets faded out, basically? So, an interesting discussion there. The running back depth is getting pretty thin now after Travis Etienne goes. So you really have to look pretty deep into your options at this point. But I do have to balance the fact of knowing that and knowing the fact I've still got to fill my quarterback and I've got to fill my tight end position. So I'm going to have to make some sacrifices, but I do feel good about, at least in the early rounds, getting McCaffrey and Chase Brown to give myself 2 good running backs. So next, what happened here is Jared Goff went off the board, and no quarterbacks were taken in the next turn. So I was very happy about that. And the question for me here was, do I get another running back? Do I even take the Denver Broncos here? But I decided to not go defense because I'm going to probably go streaming defense in a deep league like this instead of trying to get the defense I really like, number 1 overall, and reaching for them. I want to make sure I get those other positions shored up. Dobbins, I put some thought into Javonte Williams, but really what I'm going to be trying to do is trying to get my key 1 positions filled, get the quarterback where I feel the value drops off a lot, Kyler Murray. So Kyler Murray was my pick here. I know you're sacrificing some running backs that you could get to shore up your depth, but I need to get that quarterback and that tight end filled. So you got to be very judicial with your decision making here, because you're going to have to make some sacrifices here. But everybody else is too, because this is a very deep league, as you can see. Comes back around, I lose the Broncos, I lose the Steelers, so now I'm pretty much committed to punting that off to the end more than likely. To me, the biggest thing that I need to fill now is getting another receiver that I really like, who I think has a ton of upside. That's why I went Keon Coleman, because I think once you get past him, you really lose a lot of the elite upside among those later drafted wide receivers. So I decided to take Keon Coleman here, just shore that up, get that out of the way, get a good fifth receiver on my team. And then what I'm going to be trying to do is, in the next round, the tight end I really like is Zach Ertz. Should that fail, then I've got to really dig deep and try to find some options. But Zach Ertz is the guy that I really like. And in a way, he's almost a handcuff to McLaurin should he not play. So that actually works out really well for this team, should Terry McLaurin not be good to go by week 1 for whatever reason. So as a result, I was fortunate. The other tight ends that I didn't really want were all taken ahead. Lost out on some running backs that I like Jadon Blue, the Houston Texans, which is kind of the last defense that I felt okay about reaching for. So now I'm definitely going to punt the defense. But Zach Ertz comes back around to me here in the 9th round. And you can check out my tight end video of why I like Zach Ertz so much. But top 10 tight end last year on a team that is an excellent offense. He, again, figures to be one of the top receiving options for Jaden Daniels, and he's great in PPR where he gets a lot of short area targets. I think Zach Ertz is one of the most underrated tight ends that you can get, and especially in a very deep league like this, he's one of my favorite options that you can get late and then build your depth at your more important positions that you need that depth earlier on. So Ertz is one of my big targets here in the deep league formats. Then the kickers start going off the board. Well, we had Brandon Aubrey before, but a lot of other kickers went off. A lot of other defense went off the board. Coming back around, like I mentioned earlier, the running back rooms, there really are 2 running back rooms that you can target late and get a lot of the running backs that do have upside, because there's a lot of uncertainty about who the running backs are. Cleveland Browns and the Washington Commanders. The Washington Commanders are obviously the better option of the 2, because they should just be a better team in general. So I decided to go Austin Eckler here. As of now, assuming Brian Robinson is not going to be on the team, Austin Eckler would be the starter. Not you don't love his age, you don't love his mileage that he's had through the years, but I mean, the team likes him. He was pretty good at times last season, and to get him in the 10th round in a league like this is pretty good value for me. I can leave him on the bench, see what happens there. So more defenses go off the board, more kickers go off the board. The one that I really want to make sure that I get, though, is my Christian McCaffrey insurance, because as I said, he is injury prone, and I think if you're going to take him first round, you got to have a backup plan. To me, that backup plan is Isaac Guerendo in the San Francisco backfield. Kyle Shanahan finds a way to make all the running backs successful because he's very good at designing run schemes. I think that should this situation, should anything happen to McCaffrey, you have to make sure that you have his handcuff. Isaac Guerendo, he came up as available within the range that I could be taking him. So because of that, I didn't want to mess around. Just get Christian McCaffrey's handcuff, even if he may not play for me. I hope he doesn't. But I want to make sure, especially since I don't have a lot of running backs on this team, that I do have McCaffrey's handcuff. So at the bare minimum, should anything happen to him, I at least have the San Francisco running back room, essentially. A lot of other running backs of interest went off the board. So then the Browns, Jerome Ford and Dylan Sampson, those are the 2 names to monitor there. Sampson is a very interesting name to consider as well, should he have fallen. Those guys went off. Bashul Tutin, in this particular format, would be interesting since I'm looking for running backs that have high upside. He did not go off the board. But something that is a real sleeper consideration for me, no pun intended, not the sleeper app, but a real consideration is that I'm losing out on quarterbacks in this league because all these you're in a 16-team league. When people start taking backup quarterbacks, you don't really have a lot of other options should your starter get injured. And although I don't love a lot of the guys later, the one I decided to go with was Bryce Young. There's a whole wild card of options that he could have in fantasy this season. But Bryce Young at a bare minimum, especially since I have T-Mac, is a pretty solid consideration for me to take late in these deep formats. So I decided to go Bryce Young here, get a good backup quarterback. Should anything happen to Kyler Murray, I could then play Bryce Young instead. The running back that I was targeting came back around to me in the next round, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. Especially since I have Eckler, now I have the Washington backfield and the two best options to draft locked up. Feel good about this too. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how, even though I don't have a lot of running backs on this team, and that's probably the weak point of my depth, I feel like I've gotten some good options late that have been solid value for me, especially with Eckler and Krosky-Merritt. Now you start seeing a lot of the real deep names. You start seeing some of these second tight ends go off the board, like the Mason Taylors, the Darren Wallers, Pat Freiermuth, guys like that are not getting drafted for the most part in the other formats. Now this is the time for me to get my defense. I like Arizona Cardinals in terms of their early season matchup, and I think they were just an improving defense overall last season that did well with Jonathan Gannon, who's a defensive-minded coach. If you're going to punt on the defense, this is my favorite option that you can go to that has a good opening schedule to start the season, and they have some talented players as well in a good scheme. So I'm taking them as my defense here, and probably going to be going the stream route should it not work out. But I do feel confident, especially in a deep league like this, that they will be very serviceable for me. And then with my last pick, this is another big sleeper to keep an eye on. Ollie Gordon of the Miami Dolphins. Jalen Wright is generally being drafted as the running back ahead of him for the Miami Dolphins situation, but if Devon Achane has a true calf injury that holds him out, and this team, not expected to be very good, if Achane's dealing with injuries and they're struggling, they may go to Ollie Gordon. And he's a talented running back who has been successful in college, not necessarily this past season, but he's a good name to consider, especially late in a draft like this. He could very well be a starter for me should anything happen to Devon Achane. So that's my team there. So I'm pretty happy with this team too, and overall, I feel that this is, for a 16-team league, I'm pretty happy about this group of guys that I put together too. Alright, so if you stayed with me through this whole video, thank you so much. The purpose of this is to help you get an idea of the guys that I like in fantasy, and to show you that if you're in those deep leagues, if you're in those daunting positions like drafting at the last overall pick of the first round, you can still build a good roster. And I hope this video helps you to see that. And if you're interested in seeing more content like this, please subscribe to the channel, drop a comment. I love helping you guys out with your fantasy football questions, so please ask anything you got, and I'm happy to help you guys kill your drafts over the next few weeks. All right, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.